SUNSfan does have the initiative here, and he's looking at what to do. He probably shouldn't do anything, to be honest. SUNSfan, the only things he can do now are Healing Salve and Grand Melee. If he got an Echo Slam. If he got an Echo Slam. Hi folks, I am Divok and welcome to the Artificers Guild, the home of all things Artifact, and welcome to our brand new gameplay analysis series, Hindsight. Today, for the first and premiere episode, we're going to show off SUNSfan versus Linso, the EHOME player, from PAX. SUNSfan is playing the red-green Cleave deck, and Linso is playing the blue-red Control deck. Now, SUNSfan should have the massive advantage early on, being able to beef up his units and really hit hard. Linso is just looking to control until he gets to that 7 mana stage where he can play some of his best cards. So let's see how they get on. Now usually in these videos we're going to be using your footage and we're just going to be doing it from your perspective, but for this premiere I really wanted to show off both sides of the coin and show off really how both players play this game very well. I'll also be going in blind to most of the other games where I couldn't ignore this game. As soon as I saw it happening I had to watch. So disclaimer right there, I have seen this game already. But I will be trying to show off some of the intricate things that both players are doing, and maybe some of the mistakes that both sides happen to make as the game progresses. Now these early stages aren't too much of an issue for either side. SUNSfan's going to use this 3 mana turn to get some of his mercenary exiles down, which is a fantastic idea, because they are just sort of blocks in his hand. There's no really opportune time for him to play them, so getting them out early is absolutely fantastic. Whereas you'll notice Linso hasn't played a single card because he only has 5 mana and 7 mana cards, and he's only got 3 mana to play with. So he's really looking to draw something this turn to be able to counteract SUNSfan's early pressure with these mercenary exiles. So both players get to redeploy, or deploy their 4th and 5th heroes in the coming turns. This turn they both get to deploy their 4th hero, which will be Zeus for Linso and Farven for SUNSfan. Both looking to place it into the middle, and I think this is important for both players. Both players are sort of happy with the side lanes, seems to be pretty even. They want to capitalise in this middle lane. So the majority of resources for both players being placed in the middle lane here. Now SUNSfan's pretty unlucky with the arrow, if you look at Pugna here, is pointing at the creep. So Linso definitely doesn't want to worry about this lane, he's very happy with dodging that 6 damage from Pugna. And SUNSfan doesn't have any cards to stop that from happening, so both players should be passing here, and we'll move on to the middle. He could he's not going to ventriloquy, and there's no reason for SUNSfan to poison strike, so let's move on over. Now this is the important lane. At the moment, Bristleback and Axe are taking one another out, and Linso's also losing a creep. So Bristleback, the important thing to note here is even if he kills Axe, if he dies himself, he doesn't get that +2 armor. And to counteract that, Ventriloquy is played by Linso, so Axe is now going to hit the creep, and he also uses it to stop the other creep from dying, so that was an absolute value play. And now Bristleback should kill Axe and not lose the opportunity to gain that 2 armor. Now SUNSfan here has the option for Savage Wolf or Celemania's Favour, and he goes for Celemania's Favour, and he puts it in this lane, and this is something you don't see often. I'm just going to pause the video here, because this is an integral point of Celemania's Favour, okay? So Celemania's Favour, if you don't know, grants you +2 mana to a tower. So if you play it as an improvement, which you can play in any lane, if you play it in a future lane, so for example if you played it in the 3rd lane here, he would then have 5 mana, no, I can't do maths, 6 mana to play in that 3rd lane on this turn, which would be a massive bonus. He could potentially look to use some of his bigger cards, like Ogre Construct or Berserker's Call. But because he doesn't have a red hero in that final lane, he can only use 4 mana Savage Wolf anyway. And because Linso has committed so many resources to this middle lane, by putting Celemania's Favour here, he effectively nullifies all of Linso's resources that he's been piling into this middle lane, and he's basically securing the lane for himself. So let's see what happens in the final lane, where both players have very few options, but they'll have something to do. Both players should pass here, as I said, and we'll move on to this final lane for round 2. So the spectators dipped back over to the mid lane just to look for something, but in this final lane, it's Lycan against Keith, Now Keith is a great early body, but he doesn't really bring too much else to the table, whereas Lycan, like you see, is buffing the creeps to the left and right of him. So you might want to put the Savage Wolf to the left of Lycan, really buffing up that damage. But he's going to place it to the end, and I actually know what happens here, so I'm just going to let it play out, and then I'll explain why this happened, and what SUNSfan's idea behind this was. So Linso, he is taking a bit of time to do this, but the only card he can play is Clear the Deck, which will give Keith +4 cleave, which will allow him to kill Lycan, and will allow him to kill the melee creep to the next of him. Now, Linso did this because he was worried about all the pressure that was starting to build up in this lane. There were 5 units, and he only has Keith there. So by playing Clear the Deck, he clears out 2 of those units. Now, SUNSfan knows that one of the only options that he had in this lane, with 4 mana, red card, was Clear the Deck. So by playing Savage Wolf to the left of Lycan, he would get +2 attack, but he would also get killed by Clear the Deck. So it's much safer to play Savage Wolf on the far end, where you can just keep getting that +1 attack, +2 health every time a combat phase ends, completely safe and very, very far away from Keith. So Linso is going to have to commit a lot of resources to kill that Savage Wolf now. So that's the end of round 2, and we're moving into the second buy phase. Both sides actually have a bit of money to play around with here. I believe SUNSfan buys a Town Portal Scroll, which is an absolutely insane item. You should always buy well, not always, but almost always buy Town Portal Scroll whenever you can. And our challenger, Linso, he goes for a Fountain Flask and a Blade of Vigil. Now, Blade of the Vigil, for 7 gold, gives you 2 attack, which most people thought wasn't going to be too strong coming into this. But it also gives you 2 cleave, and cleave has actually been a lot better than I thought it would be. So, we're moving into round 3. Earthshaker is committed to the far right lane, or the third lane, and Legion Commander is committed to the middle lane from SUNSfan. So the middle lane is really starting to beef up now. Earthshaker, as we see a little zoom in here, his ability is still on a 2-turn cooldown, so we can't cast it just yet, but he doesn't really need it just yet. Finally, we have some cards that Linso can play. He has 5 mana, so Conflag, or Conflagration as some people are calling it, is an option for him now. There isn't much else he can really do in this first lane, so he is going to play it in the middle lane, which Conflag is a great card for clearing out multiple units, yes, but the middle lane has a lot of armor, and Conflag is not very useful against that. So I maybe would have liked to see it in the final lane, but middle lane, I'm sure it will get a decent amount of use out of it. It'll at least be doing 1 damage to all of those units. So now it's been passed back to him after SUNSfan played a Bronze Legionnaire. So he is finally going to get some damage on this tower. SUNSfan will be able to clear out most of that lane. And now we're onto this middle lane, the really important lane. Now this Poised to Strike is going to be able to let him clear out Bristleback without any problems. Bristleback finally getting that armor up. I wonder if it's worth a Fountain Flask. Would that even help him survive? I think it... No, it wouldn't. But a Fighting Instinct and a Fountain Flask, that would help him survive. But SUNSfan is right in there with the Berserker's Call. He sees what Linso's doing, buffing up Bristleback so that he won't die to Legion. But no, he's stopping it there and then. Berserker's Call not only lets him kill Legion Commander, not only lets Legion Commander kill Bristleback, but also the ability to fight all of your neighbours lets him kill Zeus as well. So that middle lane is almost secured for SUNSfan now. This final lane, which was in SUNSfan's favour, the challenger now has 2 heroes here and SUNSfan has nothing. So the challenger, Linso, really has an option to put some pressure on here. Now the only way he could kill the Savage Wolf this turn would be to Viscal Nasal Gouet, which is pretty pricey, and Blade of the Vigil on Earthshaker. So I think he does end up just going the Blade of the Vigil and he saves the Viscal Nasal Gouet for later, which... Oh, he also Fighting Instincts on Keith. So Fighting Instinct on Keith is actually a really interesting interaction. I've likened him a lot to Axe in the past, or sort of just like a basic version of Axe, but by putting Fighting Instinct on Keith, he gets 7 attack and 2 armor, which is the same as Axe. So yeah, now we see that Blade of the Vigil on Earthshaker, and he is going to bring the Savage Wolf down to 3 health, which means next turn he does kill it, but he also loses Earthshaker. And Time Portal Scroll is now available for Linso, so he will buy that Time Portal Scroll and a leather armor, which will be able to save Luna in the first lane if he chooses to, or he could use it on Earthshaker and help him with it. Now, Linso doesn't have any heroes coming out this turn, and SUNSfan has 2. So this round is going to be very much beneficial for SUNSfan, and Linso just needs to sort of cut his losses. Now, unfortunately for him, this is one of the primary turns of a control blue deck. You finally have 6 mana, which means Eclipse is an option. But, I already know, he doesn't draw it. He gets a Visceral Nasal Goo and a Thunder God's Wrath. So, still no Eclipse for him. It has got quite a few charges now. Luna's been on the field every single round so far. So, he's looking at this lane and thinking, well, I don't actually have any way to do anything here. He can use some items on Luna, maybe a Time Portal Scroll. In fact, I really like Time Portal Scroll here, and I'll let you know why. I'll pause it just here. So, next turn, he has 3 Thunder God's Wrath in his hand. Next round, sorry, he has 7 mana, which means he can cast all 3. Now, 3 Thunder God's Wraths is 12 piercing damage, and there is nothing on this battlefield at the moment that has more than 12 health. No hero anyway. So that would kill everything. That would be a team wipe. But in order to do that, he needs a blue hero in every single lane. So he has Earthshaker in the final lane, he has Luna in the first lane, and he has Zeus coming up next turn. If he Time Portal Scrolls Luna right now, he can place her again next round, ready for that Thunder God's Wrath. But if he tries to buff her up and he loses her here, he can't utilise her, and he can't utilise blue cards in 3 different lanes for another whole turn. So, again, I know what happens here. It's a little bit questionable because you are playing against this Cleave red-green deck, which has a lot of ability to target down a hero before the combat phase. So Linso here is relying on being able to get to that combat phase and keeping his Luna up. So Phantom Flask goes onto his Luna, and he thinks, oh, I'll be able to keep Luna alive now, but the Poaching Knife onto Pugna plus a duel is enough to bring her down. Sorry, not plus a duel, it's plus a Poise to Strike. And this is another thing I really want to pull up, so I'll wait until this is played, and then I'll explain why Linso sort of walked into this one. So, SUNSfan's, he's looking at duel, but he thinks, you know what, duel isn't going to do anything now that leather armor is on him, so Pugna, in his current state, cannot one-shot Luna, and if he does duel him and Luna survives on 1 health, there's a high chance that Linso has an answer to that, i.e. a Time Portal Scroll. He could also play this Ogre Conscript. It is a big unit, and it probably would secure the lane, even if he didn't kill Luna, but he knows that it's vital to kill it, so this is the important moment. So he is now poised to strike on Pugna. Now if you look at the arrows on Pugna, Pugna is facing a melee creep. So, unless for 5 mana, he has a way to kill that creep, which this Cleave deck doesn't have many options for. There's no other reason for him to be using Poise to Strike. Poise to Strike is not a modify. Poise to Strike is only +4 attack for this round. So Linso now knows that this round, SUNSfan has a plan for Pugna. He also knows that next round, he wants Luna to be alive. He also knows that if he just does a quick bit of math, if you just remove that creep, there is no lethal on this board. SUNSfan cannot kill his tower this round. So that is not his objective. So if the tower is not his objective has to be Luna. So at this point, I would definitely TP Luna out of there, so that you can utilise her next turn. But with a bit of hindsight, we know that's not what happens, and Luna is going to get dueled here, and he's going to lose the option to use a triple Thunder God's Wrath next turn. By the way, shout out to this animation, I freaking love it. This is a gorgeous animation, it's definitely my favourite in the game so far. Even more so than Thunder God's Wrath, but it is also a very good animation. And now he pumps some more gold into Mercenary Exiles. Unfortunately, the arrow is pointing at the creep, so again, not much damage going into the tower. And we move on to this middle lane. Now, Linso doesn't have a single unit here, a single hero here, so we can't cast anything. SUNSfan, gonna drop that Ogre Bruiser. So Salamaine's favour isn't really doing him much help here. because he does still have that 2 mana available and nothing to do with it. So maybe a Nether Ward would have been nice, but again you'd still have 4 mana remaining. Either way, this lane is going wonderfully for SUNSfan at the moment, and there is absolutely nothing Linso can do about it. And he should probably just forget about this lane, honestly. Although with SUNSfan TPing out Farven, you might decide you actually want to try and defend this. Or at least try and force some more resources there. Now we have the opposite. SUNSfan, no heroes. So Linso can take his time and do whatever he wants. Now, he does currently have initiative, so he could just pass, but then he would lose his Earthshaker. And he's already lost Luna, so he desperately needs to hold on to this Earthshaker. So I think Time Portal Scroll is probably the obvious idea here. And if we go back to what we discussed a couple of turns ago, he could have Visceral Nasal Good the Savage Wolf back then and instantly killed it. He now goes back to the Visceral Nasal Goo. And this is because he's going to TP Earthshaker out, and even with the +2 health that the Savage Wolf gets, he will still have -2 armor, being an effective health of 3. So anything from Zeus, Earthshaker could kill him. So another Time Portal Scroll comes up and he grabs it. Definitely a good choice, and now he has 3 heroes to pick from. SUNSfan looks like he wants to overly commit into that right lane, and to be fair, looking at the board as it is now, that is the right decision. There is no way it looks like Linso is going to be able to come back, but please do not just look at the board. Linso does have 3 heroes coming back this turn, so maybe SUNSfan should be thinking, if I were Linso, where would I commit? Where would I try to save? So Linso commits to the far left lane and to the right lane, and is just absolutely sacrificing that middle lane. Which is definitely the right idea here. He draws a Foresight and a New Orders, and at this point everyone was looking at this massive line of units and saying, if he got an Echo Slam, if he got an Echo Slam. Because SUNSfan doesn't have any way to protect any of his units, which is why he just goes for a Nether Ward in the far lane. So instead it's going to be a Thunder God's Wrath. It does kill Pugna and it does damage some of the other units further down, but with nothing in the middle lane, you can't kill them, the heroes in the final lane, before getting there. Which is important because SUNSfan will, or should have priority. Or initiative, rather. And which he does, so up to SUNSfan to see what he wants to do here. Now, he could drop a Prowler Vanguard and really push this home, but he's just going to Traveler's Cloak the Legion, and he might just leave it at that because a Prowler Vanguard still wouldn't save the Savage Wolf. There is more than enough damage for Earthshaker to kill that. Earthshaker, on the other hand, Linso could be looking to fissure both the Savage Wolf and the melee creep, so Earthshaker doesn't take any damage, because that is 6 damage on this Savage Wolf now. He really has managed to ramp up that Savage Wolf. Other options are he could drop a Red Mist Pillager at one of the ends, because that would immediately start generating more units, and would effectively win the lane for him. And of course, the other option is just to drop a Foresight and see if we get lucky, but no, we are going to go with the Red Mist Pillager, so now the option for SUNSfan is obvious. Block the Red Mist Pillager. And down goes our Prowler Vanguard. This is the only time I believe in this match that SUNSfan actually uses a Prowler Vanguard to block something when he should. So kudos to blocking here. You are still going to lose your Wolf and your Creep. So the Fissure does come out just so Earthshaker doesn't take too much damage. You don't want your Earthshaker to be bouncing around on 1 health. Especially when this lane still isn't completely won. I mean, SUNSfan only has 23 health on his tower, but Linso only has 18 there. So, entering the shopping phase, Linso actually has enough to buy the hero's cape. Plus 16 health is probably a bit better than a Time Portal Scroll. That's one of the only times that you think, maybe I'll buy the other thing. Now, at this stage in the game, things are getting a bit dicey for SUNSfan. So, he's done well in the early game, which you'd expect because he is running this Cleave deck, which is notoriously strong early on. But now he only has 1 card in his hand, and it's Grand Melee, which isn't particularly useful here. I mean, he could just drop it down on a lane, which he thinks might benefit from it, but there aren't really too many opportunities to be using it here. Whereas Linso, he's starting to hit his peak. He can Thunder God's Wrath now, he can Eclipse now, plus do something else. And on top of that, he has a lot of cards, including he had gold to buy more cards. And SUNSfan will see in a minute that Linso used to have 19 gold. Linso now has 2 gold, so SUNSfan knows that something happened. He bought one 17 gold item, and depending on how much he knows the game, he might know that that was a hero's cape. So we're moving into this next round, and this round really is important for both sides. If SUNSfan can shut Linso down here, then his heroes are starting to become more and more staggered. However, if Linso managed to deal enough damage to SUNSfan's heroes and really break through, he can really push for the win here, because at the moment SUNSfan's towers are immaculate. They started on 30 health. That was the handicap that the quote-unquote champions had. So at the moment his towers are looking incredibly healthy, but he was having the advantage early on, and now we finally see a Time of Triumph and an Echo Slam, two of the best cards for the late game for this deck. So we've got to try and decide which way around we want to do it. The initiative is with SUNSfan, so you can't just immediately Echo Slam. And now a Divine Purpose comes out on Lycan, which is a brilliant read by SUNSfan. He knows that he must have been incredibly lucky to not get Echo Slammed last round, so he immediately uses that Divine Purpose to help Lycan out, so that even if an Echo Slam does come through, all he's losing is creeps. So at this point you think, well, a Thunder God's Wrath is still okay, because you can use it again in the mid lane and kill off the end heroes, but Linso decides to go with an Echo Slam, which at the time, we kind of didn't think it was the right idea, but it does seem to work out for him, as Lycan is now basically not a threat. He only has 4 attack, he is immune, but he's not really hitting that hard, and you're finally getting some strong damage down on this tower. Now, there's nothing else SUNSfan can do, and there's nothing else the challenger can do, so they're both going to pass here and move on to the next lane. So Time of Triumph, or the use of Time of Triumph, is incredibly important here, and actually Linso does decide to do one more thing. He new orders Zeus onto this mercenary, which is actually a really good idea, because SUNSfan just spent all of his gold trying to buff that, so now that gold is lost just for a 1 mana card. It was actually a very small play, but it was actually very, very important and integral to how the game turns out in the end. I won't spoil it for those of you that don't know. So we're in this middle lane, and SUNSfan does have the initiative here, and he's looking what to do. He probably shouldn't do anything, to be honest. The only option is Grand Melee, and I don't see a lane where it's vitally important, so he has just passed. And Linso has to decide what he's going to do. Thunder God's Wrath is pretty good here, but the double Thunder God's Wrath is what you were really after, and you've now given initiative to SUNSfan. Of course, little does he know, SUNSfan can't do anything with that initiative. But now you're in a peculiar spot. So you might just think, immediately Thunder God's Wrath. However, this lane is basically lost for SUNSfan. Middle lane is basically won for SUNSfan. So if he does Thunder God's Wrath, he lets Axe and Legion Commander redeploy wherever they want to for free. So instead, he goes with a Time of Triumph. I actually really like this. He knows he has a TP scroll in his hand. So one of those heroes that has +4 Siege, +4 Cleave, +4 everything, he knows he can reposition them next turn. Or next round, rather. Both getting 2 melee creeps in that far lane. It's not going to help either of them because there's only 2 health left on the tower, and both the heroes have Siege there. So SUNSfan is trying to look for the other 2 lanes. He knows that he somewhat knows that the middle lane is secure, but he doesn't want to risk it. It looks like he's actually going to put that Farven hero in the middle lane. I kind of wish he'd put, yeah, okay, so he does move it into the first lane. That middle lane is over. Luna can't do much. I guess he was worried about the Eclipse, but so long as he keeps priority, maybe he draws something to deal with it. And this priority, this initiative, is an incredibly important thing to remember all the way through. SUNSfan does a really, really good job of controlling initiative. It almost seems like he has it every single time he needs it. So, where are we in this game? There's 7 health left on this tower. SUNSfan, if he kills this, he has the win in middle lane. Linso, if he kills this enemy tower with 21 health, the far right tower, has 2 health, and he wins the game there. So both players are looking to this first lane to decide the game. They both have one other lane completely under their control. This first lane is where everything is going to be decided. Now Linso wants to try and he has two options here. Either he tries to find a way to get through the heroes, or around, or kill the heroes and be able to get past them. Personally, I mean, Echo Sand basically doesn't do anything here, so he does just end up passing, which I don't disagree with. SUNSfan hasn't really shown that he's got much going for him in his very tiny hand, so you don't have to worry too much about losing either of your heroes. SUNSfan at the moment probably just deciding what he wants to do, and this would have been a pretty decent time to drop a Prowler Vanguard. Why do I say that? Well, it would actually save his Farben. But he might also be deciding, okay, yeah, so maybe he does just pass here so that he keeps priority or initiative in the next lane. Yeah, he is passing. Okay, really good move by SUNSfan there, because he does want to make sure he has the initiative in the next lane, just in case the challenger Linso had an Eclipse. Not that he would have much to do with it. He could drop a Prowler Vanguard or a Divine Purpose. Okay, so that was definitely the right move by SUNSfan here. We can see, because we have Hindsight, that Linso doesn't have an Eclipse, but that Eclipse is always a worry, and it has quite a few charges by now. You would easily kill both of those units. So this is what I was trying to say earlier about initiative. You really want to make sure that you're planning out ahead. Don't just look at this lane. Look at where that tiny arrow in the top left is pointing. So, as you see, Axe 3 health, his bruisery guy 5 health, Conscript rather, that's what they're called. So Eclipse would easily demolish these guys. And SUNSfan, I don't know whether he tries to read this. Will he Divine Purpose or will he Prowler? Oh, he can't do either because it's just a red lane. So he just passed again and he's going to stick with initiative. At this point, he is just crossing his fingers then. I thought that was an absolutely amazing play from SUNSfan, but he was actually just keeping initiative. And that's another thing you can do. If there isn't an absolutely obvious play and it doesn't look like the enemy's about to completely destroy you, then just pass. Why not? Then you've got initiative for the next turn. And if you don't need it there, you've got initiative for the next turn. And so on and so forth until you actually do need it. And again, I think this is something SUNSfan does incredibly well here. He had initiative in that first lane. He's going to pass it through all of the lanes in this round, so that he has initiative back in the first lane where it's most important. And maybe, just maybe, he draws something that helps him win there. So both players conserve their cards here. They know these last two lanes are basically a done deal. The only thing Linso would look to do here is probably teleport one of these heroes out. He could also use Cunning Plan to try and draw into another Time of Triumph. Would be really nice on the final lane. But he Visco Nasal Goose the Legion Commander, just in case the game goes on longer. She now has -1 armor, which is actually quite a nice idea. You're not really going to be using that mana anywhere else. So I like the use of it there. I would also like a Cunning Plan here. But he's just going to TP Earthshaker out. And that is actually a fantastic idea. So you had the option of a red or a blue hero. Pick whichever one you desperately need the spells for. He knows that SUNSfan has initiative. So he teleports his important casting hero, Earthshaker, so he can put it in the first lane and he can definitely cast a blue spell. Unless, for whatever reason... In fact, no, there is no way. So SUNSfan could have had a Berserker's Call, which he could have used on Pugna, but that would have killed Zeus and left Earthshaker with very little health. Wouldn't have killed him. So we see that he gets a Foresight and a Red Mist Pillager. No Time of Triumph this time, so... but with 10 mana, he could Cunning Plan to try and draw it. I'm going to pause right here because there is something incredibly important to talk about at this stage of the game. So, both players need to kill this tower. Whichever player kills this tower wins. Both players now have quite a few cards. So, the order in which you play these cards is very important. SUNSfan does have priority, so if he's got something like Divine Purpose, which he can use to save Pugna from any damage, you play that first. But other cards, for example, cards that set up a victory, like a Time of Triumph, for example, you still need to position around. So you don't play that first. You need to hold on to that until the absolute latest moment possible. So you want to start throwing your Traveller's Cloak on your Bristleback. You want to use your Red Mist Maul on your Zeus. Just, these items don't really show what's happening. Or if they do, well, they do show what's happening, they show that you're stalling. But that's not enough information for the enemy to make use of. So SUNSfan should be healing salving his Pugna if he desperately needs to. Just stall out until you can absolutely find the perfect time to drop your combo. So, we'll see the rest of this play out. So, as both players might find out eventually, is that Linso actually has lethal here. He can new orders the Bristleback to the tower. It's something not most people have really figured out yet, but it specifies choose a new combat target for an ally. Combat target can be towers. Combat target can be any enemy neighbour, including towers if there is a straight line arrow space to it. So he Red Mist Mauls to buy time, then he Cunning Plans to draw, sees its second flag. That's not really going to help him at all. So now he's looking for lethal. He knows he can new orders the Bristleback, and that should get SUNSfan starting to worry a little bit. Now, you saw SUNSfan Divine Purpose, but I'm going to point something else at the end, just before we see these units clash, as to what else he could have done to maybe improve his situation. So Bristleback is now hitting the tower, he needs 1 more damage, and he happens to have a Red Mist Pillager. SUNSfan, the only things he can do now are Healing Salve and Grand Melee. So Red Mist Pillager goes down, and at this point, SUNSfan knows he's lost. He knows there is nothing he can do, at all. Now, remember what I said a little bit earlier, SUNSfan dropped that Prowler Vanguard in front of the first Red Mist Pillager to block its damage and stem the bleeding. That was the only time SUNSfan used one of these Prowler Vanguards to block direct attacks. Now, it was a little too late. SUNSfan didn't know that there was a new order on the side of Linso. However, if he thought about it a slightly different way, if he said, okay, I'm happy to lose Pugna. I have 2 heroes coming up next turn. I don't mind losing the Pugna. So I will let Pugna die. In exchange, I will summon 2 Prowler Vanguards. Both, well, it wouldn't really matter where they summon them, but one to the left of Lycan at least, so he gains +2 damage. That would have at least completely stalled out for this turn, and he could have looked to draw into something that would help him further on. He would have 2 more heroes coming back, which would mean 3 heroes in this lane. He could then Divine Purpose one of them, and he would have 2 immune heroes and 1 hero that was also just there to help with damage and stuff. So that was the only way that SUNSfan could have avoided this, but as we will see in the next few seconds, that is not what he did, and he graciously passes the win over to EHOME's own Linso. So congratulations to him, and very well played to SUNSfan, and just a very good game from both sides. So there's just a few things to take away from this. I wanted to point out some of the good and bad themes that both players had going on. So starting with SUNSfan, the red-green cleave player. Drop your darn units, man. Yes, this isn't a typical card game where units are everything. It's a lot more spell-driven than most other card games, or item-driven even at times. But units are still very, very powerful if there is something in the way. Unless there is siege damage, they're not hitting the tower. And even if he did get Time of Triumph down, that would only have been 12 damage. Not enough to finish the game. So a tiny little misplay at the end of the game there, and he could have dropped those units at any point during the game. However, SUNSfan's biggest bonus, the reason why the massive advantage he had going in and throughout this entire game, was his priority or initiative advantage. He controlled that so well. You saw it in that last, or the penultimate round. He passed every single lane so that he would have initiative again in the first lane, which was where the contention was happening. So, absolutely great example of that. Go and watch a couple more of SUNSfan's games because it is something he does repeatedly. In terms of Linso, our brand new champion, the blue-red control player, one thing I did notice that he wasn't using all of the mana he could, which resulted in him having a massive hand, which was fantastic, but he didn't actually use most of those cards at all. As I said before, SUNSfan, brilliant priority control. So if you're going against that, if you know you don't have priority, use your darn cards. If you've got a Foresight, just use it. It's going to be 2 more cards. It's not like you're losing 1 card. You're using mana that you have to spare to gain 2 more cards, so just use it. However, he did do some incredibly good things. Buying those TPs every single time they come up, incredibly useful in actually winning the game, bringing Earthshaker across, giving the spaces for that Red Mist Pillager to be at the end, and also in this very final turn, using those items to bait out SUNSfan's reactions. He spent most of his mana at the beginning, so he drops a Red Mist Maul on Zeus. SUNSfan then passes. You know he's run out of options. He doesn't have anything he can really do. And then you're free to play out your entire combo as you wish. So gaining intelligence like that, getting intel on the enemy, just by throwing out cards, items on units, or swapping their places with a cunning plan, or drawing using Foresight, these are ways you can really get a huge advantage in the late game. And Linso used this perfectly to construct the victory. So let me know what you thought about this gameplay analysis series. Are you excited for the time that you guys can send your clips in and have them featured on the channel? What deck are you first going to use and record to send in to us? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching our first and premiere of Hindsight. It's been a blast recording it. This game was really fun to watch and fun to comment over as well. If you'd like to help us out, please, as always, hit that like and hit that subscribe button. And there's also the bell icon if you want to make sure you never miss a video ever again. If you like this video and you'd like to see some more, then here are a couple of videos you might enjoy. Both a recent and a related video for you to watch. I've been Divok of the Artificers Guild, and I will see you next time.